everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, and today we're doing another Hong Kong content review, this time for Police Story 2 on 4K, part of the EUREKA box set edition that was released a little while back. Slowly making my way through my kind of watch pile of Hong Kong movies. I do really appreciate the patience and slowly dishing out the content. And that reminds me, I want to say a big thank you also to the new subscribers and everyone that's still supporting the channel, commenting, liking, viewing. I've had a really big uptake in kind of subscribers recently, about 7 or 8 new subscribers in this past month, which is really surprising considering, you know, I'm a bit slow on the content recently. Work, life, it's December, Christmas time is around the corner. Things can get really chaotic, and with the new job as well, I really do appreciate your time and patience, guys, and viewing the content and interacting with me. It's a really a lot of fun making these videos, and I definitely will be making a lot more coming up soon, hopefully, for sure. But today I finally checked out, after such a long time, Police Story 2 on 4K. This is my second viewing of the film, and this one's an interesting one because this is a bit of the odd duckling. This is a bit of the dark horse of the trilogy. So I want to dive a bit more into this and decode a little bit of what people might or might not like about Police Story 2. So let's dive into Jackie Chan's Police Story 2.
Some men, they kidnapped me!
Police Story 2 was released in 1998, directed by Jackie Chan. Stars Jackie Chan, has a bigger budget from Golden Harvest, has a lot of the familiar cast from the first movie, alongside a lot of new characters, and a much more ambitious kind of storyline. That doesn't quite work as well as the first movie. Being the first one is so monumental to not only Jackie Chan's career, being kind of lightning in a bottle, kind of like that pure awesomeness in terms of comedy, action, storyline. It just has everything you want to see within a Hong Kong movie. It is the perfect kind of introduction movie to anyone that wants to kind of see a glorious Hong Kong movie. Amazing stunts, amazing comedy. Jackie Chan just giving everything he can in that film and really proving to not only Golden Harvest and the studios and everyone else making, but hey, look, I'm here to play. I'm setting the bar really high, and it kind of changed the way kind of Hong Kong cinema is. And obviously there's a few movies kind of before this with Tomorrow with John Woo, but you know, Hong Kong movies during the 80s were definitely a lot more explosive with the new wave of kind of crime thrillers and cops and robbers, and more kind of, you know, gunplay stunts with not just kind of, you know, fighting, but also using kind of weaponry and, you know, vehicles and all sorts. This was a very exciting time for kind of Hong Kong movies, and it is the golden kind of age of kind of Hong Kong movies, which a lot of people do know and love, and everyone was really stepping up to kind of put their kind of 2 cents, and everyone was trying to be the next level kind of, you know, action star kind of thing, which is fantastic. And there's some really fantastic movies in that. And funny enough though, from doing Police Story 1, he did Armour of God, which we all well know well. He did a really big stunt in that film. He went really wrong, which compromised a lot of the production of that film. And then he later did Project A Part 2, which he did another stunt, which he almost killed himself on, the clock tower scene. And then he did Dragons Forever, which I'm still waiting for my 4K edition. It is currently, you know, delayed in the post at the moment. But 3 massive movies, you know, in the span of the kind of time between Police Story 1 and Police Story 2, and it gives you a little bit of perspective on kind of what a little bit went wrong with this one. And this is interesting because this is my second viewing. I haven't seen this since, you know, watching it way back when. And Police Story 2 is not as strong as the first one. That's an understatement. You know, this is a bit of a black horse, bit of the kind of like, you know, the middle movie of the trilogy, and a lot of people like it, some people don't. It's kind of like it's a bit all over the place, and I can see what people are coming from. I think after watching it again, I think it's a pretty solid film. I think it's pretty good, but I understand the criticisms. I understand why people have issues with it, and I've kind of like, as watching it again, the biggest issue I would say with the film is two things. Is the pacing. It's a 2-hour movie, part of the extended cut on the kind of 4K edition and on the Blu-ray, but you can get the theatrical cut, which is about 1 hour and 45. So maybe that kind of, you know, theatrical cut might help a little better in terms of the pacing. But it's a 2-hour movie, and considering the storyline is purely quite simple, it's presented very complex, and it's has a lot of layers to it, and they're introducing a lot of different type of story beats in the film. It's a big movie. There's a lot going on in this film. In terms of where they want to go, and you know, considering the first portion of it, the first kind of say maybe half an hour, 35 minutes, is the aftermath of the first movie, which is fantastic, which is great. I was really kind of hooked into it again. You get kind of a slow recap of the first movie, and you get the villains from the first one kind of, out of jail, they're causing mischief kind of thing. They want to ruin his life, and you get a lot more kind of Jackie Chan and May's kind of, relationship kind of status, and they're kind of back and forth, which I think is great because I am really invested in their kind of, relationship in these movies. I like the development, even though the development is very much kind of like rinse and repeat in terms of making screwed over a lot in the film. She does get her moments, granted, a lot more in this one. She does kind of hold her own a little bit more, and she's a bit more involved in the storyline. To a lot more heavier degree, but she's always kind of like the damsel in distress, and she's always kind of in the way, or she's the butt end of the joke kind of thing. And I think Maggie Cheung plays it so goddamn well, and being the fact I've seen her do some extraordinary kind of movies and performances after, it's surprising that for a character that is so kind of arguably in the right, in the sense, she is someone who just wants, Jackie to be there and have a boyfriend, but, she kind of understands the danger of the job a lot more in this one compared to what she did in the first one. She's a lot more kind of whiny, a lot more jealous, and didn't understand the kind of the context, what's going on. This one, she's a lot more involved in it in terms of the bad guys and being a lot more centered in terms of being a hostage situation. And I like that involvement. I think that drama aspect, I think, is definitely one of the positives watching the film again. And kind of, I like, Jackie Chan's getting really pissed off and really angry. We go into the restaurant sequence, having a great fight sequence and that. All the stunts, all the action is really top notch. It's really fantastic. You can definitely tell Jackie's having a lot of fun doing it. And there's some really, even the smaller sequence of him planting the bug onto the kind of, that kind of boardroom sequence is great. It's just little bits here and there, but I think the pacing of it doesn't help, because once you get past that bit, it turns into kind of the second portion of the storyline, which is him kind of quitting and him kind of, I don't know, like, the consequences of the first film. He's become like, demoted. He's, he's like, oh, why did you destroy the building? Why did you show the chandelier? The cost that you did in that first movie was so extraordinary. We have to discipline you. We have to make an example of you. And he feels like he can't do his job anymore. And being the fact the bad guys did get out, down to a technicality, down to like an illness in a sense, he kind of feels very defeated, and he's just kind of very kind of, being labelled as impulsive and kind of, reckless. And he is, and to some extent, but he is that kind of the hero cop. He's the cop that's getting shit done, and he's just willing, so desperate to kind of stop the bad guy. He's willing, destroy a lot of property and a lot of glass in between. And in fact, he does it in this film as well. I'm shocked he gets away with it. I'm shocked he's not got a slap massive bill from the amount of damage he does. Despite the fact he's off duty in some of the sequences. But it turns into kind of like a second portion of the film where you got a bunch of blackmailers. The villains of the film are basically wanting to get rich. They want $10 million. They blew up a kind of a supermarket, and they're blackmailing these kind of high risk kind of board members, and they're saying, hey, look, we want a high demand amount of money. We're going to blow up all these properties, all these buildings. And the problem with it is that I think the villains are not that interesting. I don't think they're well developed. I think they're quite slowly introduced throughout the film. It's a 2-hour movie, and yet it feels like longer. It feels like nearly almost like a 3-hour movie, for the fact that the film takes so long for the introduction of these characters. I understand what they're trying to do in terms of kind of like the second half of the film, with having a task force, an undercover, young kind of 22 Jump Street style vibe, next generation of police force units going undercover, trying to understand, where they get the dynamite from, and who are these people, and where the hideout is, and on paper and on as you kind of say it, it sounds good. It sounds like a good kind of intense kind of thriller, a slow investigation. I don't mind a slow burner. I don't mind kind of like slowly uncovering characters and one character leading to the next character. And that film does exactly this. You've got exactly that, but it doesn't quite present itself as interesting as it could be. I think scenes are a little too long as they should be. I think there is a serious lack of comedy in the film. There is a little bit towards the start, granted, and some of those moments do work, but they feel kind of very staged. They feel very kind of like, oh shit, we forgot to put comedy in it, so let's just put a couple here and there. I think there's about 3 maybe comedy sequence in the film. It's a lot more sort of a serious film. I understand that in terms of the tone shift within the kind of the second act. The first half is dealing with the aftermath of the first film, a lot more kind of the relationship between Jackie and May, and you get some of the comedy and some of the kind of the conflict within that first half, which I think that first half is really, really good. And I was actually thinking, damn, this is a lot better than I remember it being, and then start to see where the problems would come myself. As I'm watching the film, I'm just thinking to myself,
when are they gonna get to the fireworks factory?
it's as simple as that, because that fireworks factory sequence is pretty badass, it's pretty awesome. You can definitely tell we spent a lot of money on that sequence, actually blowing up the building. You know, considering there's very little in the film in terms of matching the level of the first movie, in terms of the stunts, in terms of the awesome action sequences towards really the third act. It definitely tries to go bigger and better. This one definitely feels more like a Reliance sequel compared to some of the other ones later on, which, you know, Police Story 3 and, you know, First Strike, funny enough, both got kind of retitles, Super Cop and First Strike, Jackie Chan's First Strike, and a lot more of a solo kind of invention movies, even though they are canon to this kind of initial franchise. I think the first 4 movies are kind of initial canon, but, you know, they are a lot more of a solo movies. You know, you don't need to have any pre-existing knowledge of the events of the first 2 movies to enjoy those. Those are solid individual adventures that come a lot more kind of Indiana Jones inspired, which I think he kind of learned that as he went along with doing, you know, Armor of God 2 later on. You don't have to have your knowledge of the first movie to get that second film, even though it is a sequel. And I think this one relies a little bit too much, leans a little bit too much on the first movie to kind of get your kind of appreciation. Granted, there is some good escalation in the film. I do like where the film goes into, you know, Omega being kidnapped and he thinks the villains in the past movie, but their role in it is just to kind of antagonize kind of Jackie's character. They're just there to kind of cause a little bit of trouble, to kind of remind you a little bit of the first movie, and that's about it. They don't really serve much purpose. Surprisingly, the board members, the ones that the blackmailers are actually going against, they're very little in the film. They don't really do much. They're just kind of, they are just there. They are the ones. I thought there might be something a little bit shady going on with them. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the film, and it never really kind of takes advantage of it. You know, you had the villains from the first film. You've had these kind of potential corrupt kind of, you know, board members that are kind of, you know, investing in property, and, you know, there seems to be some kind of like connection between all 3 you could do, and I think there's something interesting you could have explored. Despite the issues the film does have, I think it's a pretty solid film overall. I did enjoy my experience watching it again. However, I do think the 4K edition, I have to agree on this one, is not very good. And I think that's not down to the actual 4K itself. I think that's down to the way the film was presented, the way the film was shot, the way the film was kind of, you know, put together in terms of the color grading, in terms of the sound. I don't think it's top notch. This isn't kind of like the first movie kind of 4K level. The first movie 4K is fucking phenomenal. It's amazing 4K, definitely a good step up from the first one. This one, I didn't think it was as strong. I think the cinematography in this one is not as crisp, not as strong, not as interesting compared to the first one. I think a lot of the kind of nighttime sequences are very kind of dark, and I think, again, that's not down to the 4K edition necessarily. I think that's just down to the way the film was originally kind of presented, the way the original film was put together. I don't think it kind of presents itself well on a 4K disc. So it's a little bit disappointing in that regard, but you do get all the extras from the original Blu-ray edition, plus you get the theatrical cut, so you get the option between the extended and the kind of theatrical. Next time I will watch it, I will be watching the theatrical to see if the pacing's a little bit tighter. Overall, Police Story 2 does get a bad rap, and it does rely a little bit too much on the first one for your enjoyment. I don't think it's a film that works necessarily by itself. I do think there is some good stuff in there. I do like the development of Jackie and May's kind of relationship. I like the first hour of that film. I think it's really good with the whole repeated bad guys from the first one, you know, causing some mischief and mayhem. And it does have some light kind of comedy moments. It has some good drama between those 2 characters. I think the build-up is quite good, but I think the execution of the last hour in the kind of the second act leading to the third act is very slow. It's very kind of very unbalanced with kind of how the villains are presented. You don't really know who they are until the really late kind of last kind of 20 minutes of the film necessarily, and I don't think they're particularly that memorable, that enjoyable to kind of watch. I think there's some missed opportunities for having the bad guys from the first one, the potential sleazy kind of board members, and connecting with the blackmailers. I think that you could have done something there with the storyline. I think there isn't much comedy in the film. It's very lacking in comedy, much more of a serious film. It's a little bit too dated in places with the kind of very 80s kind of technology and the kind of 22 Jump Street kind of new youth kind of crowd, which is not bad in the film. It's okay, but, you know, they don't really serve much purpose apart from sharing a little bit of screen time from Jackie, allowing Jackie to direct behind the camera instead of being in front of the camera all the time. So that's my thoughts and opinions on Police Story 2, guys, and the 4K edition. You know, there's a little bit of disappointment in the air from this kind of review, but it's an honest opinion. What are your thoughts, guys? Please comment down thoughts on the film itself. You compared to the rest of the movies, what are your thoughts on the franchise? You know, compared to 1 and 3 and 4 and onwards kind of thing. I'd love to see your thoughts and opinions, guys. Please comment down below. and I will be doing Police Story 3 very soon, guys. So meantime, guys, I'm for reviews, signing out.